I mean, we're 1 minute early, but I think we should make a start. Yeah. So welcome everybody. Welcome back to day two. So this session is session 14, which is called Where the Spirit Meets the Bone. Okay, my presentation is called Autoethnography to Autoaltergraphy, Exploring Similarity Across Difference. And I suppose just before I get going with this, I have to say this has ended up being quite a theoretical, sort of philosophical paper with very little stories in it. And I kind of apologize for that to start with. But hopefully, in the ideas that it introduces, it will nonetheless still be engaging, I hope. So, yeah, here we go. Autoethnography, in a traditional sense, offers a personal account, a graphy of an auto, of the experiences of a group of people who usually have something in common, an ethnos. But today I want to suggest a different starting point, a different idea of what many of us, I believe, do in autoethnography. What I'm going to speak about is a version of autoethnography which is at least certainly truer to my own practice of the craft, both epistemologically, in terms of how we know what we know, and methodologically, in terms of how we go about it. This version of autoethnography, which I'm going to call autoaltergraphy, for reasons that I hope will become clear, starts from the premise that we have no real idea what kind of beings we are. We are humans, yes, but what a human actually is remains an absolutely open question. My background in anthropology, the study of human, reassures me of the truth of this fact. One of the great strengths of anthropology has been to show that there are many different ideas, different versions of what a human is, each one of these carrying their own weight, their own logic, each working in their own unique way, and each leaving their own particular and distinctive trace in the world. Encountering these different ways of being human and taking them seriously unsettles one's own version, one's own assumptions about what a human is, revealing these ideas and expressions to be as contingent as everyone else's. What I am, what each of us are, as I said, is an open question. All I really know is that I am something and that I experience stuff. Experience is, according to a long history of respected philosophers and thinkers, the most fundamental fact. The fact that I, and you, of course, experience stuff is pretty much unquestionable. Everything else, what exists and how those things relate to one another, the apparently solid substance of the world itself, is secondary. Physical science acts as if these things are primary, that these things, the world itself, are the things that we can be most certain about. But these things are only known through experience, and they therefore exist at a different level of certainty that cannot match the fundamental certainty of experience itself. Through experience, we know all these other things, something that the original phenomenologists felt great urgency to point out. Experience is primary. I experience, I am. This, for me, is what the auto of autoethnography and autoaltergraphy, as we shall see, is. It is a something, and let us leave open what that something is, experiencing stuff. And what is the stuff it is experiencing? It is experiencing itself, the stuff that makes it up, of course, but it is also experiencing stuff which is in some ways different to itself. Not entirely different, but different by degrees. In its broadest possible sense, the auto is experiencing both itself and otherness, stuff which appears at least to be outside the boundary of where I, in some shape and form, end, and otherness begins. The auto, this something that is experiencing stuff, is immersed in otherness, in alterity, something which appears to be, to some degree, outside the boundaries of who or what I am. So, for example, on this side of the auto-alter relationship, I am responsible for guiding and steering the auto, whatever that is, in a way that I am not responsible for guiding and steering that which is other, that which is alter. Hence arises individuality and personal moral and ethical responsibility. Equally, I experience stuff as an auto, whereas much of the experience of the alter is beyond me, appearing at least to be beyond my grasp in a way that my own experience is not. Hence the fascination in and infinite potential for exploration of the auto-alter relation. So now we're ready to begin the work of autoaltergraphy, or rather we are ready to notice it. For our very existence in the world, our emergence in the world as a something experiencing stuff implies from its very outset an auto-alter relationship that itself leaves a trace. Like a warm cushion on an empty sofa, or a scent of perfume hovering in a vacant, humid bathroom, or a slippery trail across the kitchen floor each morning, all auto-alter relations leave traces. These are the graphia of autoaltergraphy, the traces of presence, the traces of encounter between auto and alter. Most of these traces, these graphia, are unintentional byproducts of auto-alter encounters, but other traces are intentionally made, for what purpose we shall return to below. These ideas underlie some recent autoaltergraphic explorations I've been making into mystic experiences. I've been bringing some of my own, shall we call them mystic experiences, into conversation with, into contact with, into dialogue with the mystic experiences of others, and with the very simple aim of exploring similarity and difference through a method of resonance. These explorations, these auto-alter encounters have left traces, one of which is a now rather long and peculiar article written for How Journal of Ethnographic Theory, with which I think it is quite possible the editors don't know what to do. It is a strange trace, having been formed in a very specific social and cultural context, at a particular historic moment in time when legitimacy is constructed in distinctive ways and shaped through the narrow birth canal of, amongst other things, double-blind peer review. An odd child, it is a trace nonetheless of encounter between auto and alter, and intentional autoaltergraphy. And what is the purpose of such work beyond the lower motivations? And by these, I mean a need to publish, to contribute to the ref, to keep my job, to gain status, to make a name for myself, to gain recognition as an expert in a particular field, to have the satisfaction of others reflecting back to me how clever or intelligent or perceptive I am, blah, blah, blah. What is the purpose of such work? At this time, at least, I would like to suggest this. Encounters with others are the tool through which we are led out into the world. Exducere, education, in its most raw, real, bodied, breathing sense. They are also the door, and I don't have time to expand on this here, but they are the door through which we become more fully human. Openness to the world is a great risk, but closeness to the world is a long, slow, suffocating death. A refusal to be led out, to be educated. Other brave souls have risked being led out before us. They have allowed the auto-alter relation to work its true magic, to massage its salving oils. Traces, intentional and unintentional, have been left through their encounters. Traces that, like golden threads, we can pick up and follow. Absorbing such traces in our experiences, we simultaneously leave traces of our own. So this is the work of autoaltergraphy. It is, as I argued at the start, just another name for what many of us are already doing in autoethnography and other related practices. In sum, it is an intentional trace-making art rooted in risky auto-alter encounters which lead us out on pathways to becoming more fully human. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Hanna Schweigert, and the title of my autoethnography is, as Jamie said, Family Loss and Anticipatory Grief, a retrospective autoethnographic analysis of terminal illness's impact on the family. And I completed it at Sussex with Jamie as one of my supervisors for my undergraduate sociology degree this spring. And it specifically focused on reflecting the lived experience which occurred from receiving a terminal illness diagnosis in 2024 and having to endure that illness within my family. The conference's 2026 theme of connections made me think of how the global north has become detached from the natural human life cycle, one which connects all of us. We all die, we all grieve, and at some point in our life, we all might experience ill health and disability at some point in our life. Yet this human experience which provides the opportunity for interconnectedness through growth, empathy, love, and compassion is only increasingly disconnecting individuals. The individualistic culture of our society pushes these human experiences into the margins, trapped within the home and medical institutions, where the burden of life and loss is placed onto the individual. Writing a retrospective autoethnography on my family's journey through terminal glioblastoma, terminal brain cancer, forced me to acknowledge my grief and process traumatic events over the last 2 years, which I was also guilty of disconnecting myself from. The writing process allowed me to reconnect with my grief and loss through discovering the ways in which my experiences make me a part of a shared humanity. In my literature review, I came across the psychological term chronic sorrow. It was the first time I read something that spoke to my experience and made me feel like my feelings weren't too complicated, too alien to understand. It connected me to something that made me feel human again. In my work, I reflected a lot on how autoethnography can be a tool to combat the shift towards extreme apathy, hyper-individualism, and the dehumanization of marginalized groups, where now more than ever, the NHS is becoming fully privatized, making healthcare privilege and not right. This will affect us all, but especially those who are unable to physically exist in society, such as the old, disabled, and terminally ill. Sociology as a discipline, and especially autoethnography, has the tools to academically resist and document the shift while also encouraging connection through the shared rehumanization of marginalized individuals and sharing raw lived experience. So now I will read reinterpretive extracts from the first 2 months of my retrospective journaling to understand how terminal illness affects the family. My sister and I, February 2024, my sister and I were out for coffee in the rain when we got a call from my dad. Immediately, my heart dropped as he was already wailing before it incoherently informed us that our mom was in the ICU having a violent seizure. We dropped everything and without packing, rushed to the train station to come home from uni. After 3 trains and 4 hours of crying, we got to the ICU. By the time we got there, she was stabilized in the recovery ward. I remember she was completely knocked up on whatever medication they had to give her to soothe the seizing, and her face and body were swollen to an extent which looked dangerous. My dad was sitting beside her bed in silence, staring at her swollen body as it pulsated like a dying fish. The lights were sickly, the beeping and crying was unbearable, and all the other patients around her were old, and they looked like they were dying too. The families were coming in and out that week as we spent all our days there, only they were the patients' adult children and grandchildren. I remember feeling so much anger that my mom was even in a place like this, a place that for what looked like a management and prevention ward for what seemed like inevitable near death. The patients were old and on ventilators, some not even conscious, some coughing and crying with pain. Everyone on the ward was begging the nurses for painkillers, including my mother. She was screaming with pain for days, and no one seemed to care. She was refusing to eat or drink anything, and no one seemed to care. I truly felt like she was left to suffer and rot with the supervision of nurses who weren't allowed to do anything. I begged the nurses to try and give her Fortisip or a fluid drip, anything to keep her nourished. Nothing. We truly thought she was dying. She laid there for days, half conscious, screaming and groaning, and still we had no answers. Our minds were swirling with the worst case scenario. It felt so cruel and beyond our control. We had no voice, no empathy, and no dignity. Here was my mother, such a strong, independent woman, a nurse reduced to a hospital bed. At an institution she worked in her whole life, helpless and forced to suffer at the hands of protocol and reduced to another patient on a bed, which rotates through people as fast as possible. March 2024. By the time she had her biopsy and was released from the second hospital, we were still not being told what was going on. They had sent a hospital bed and bedpan to our home for my mother's arrival and gave us a temporary wheelchair and a walker to take her home and get her into bed. We were also given a bunch of new prescriptions, which she would have to take at different points throughout the day, possibly saving her from another seizure and life-threatening injuries. My dad's sister and I All this was extremely overwhelming, as we were forced to figure all this out on our own. We had to navigate how to care for a disabled and ill body in a home that was in no way designed to accommodate my mother's needs, while also dealing with the financial, emotional, medical stress. It was on that day we were slapped in the face with our newfound isolation and invisibility within our family home. Later that month, my sister and I figured we'd better sort out our university. We were in our first year, and we knew we might have to be home for the next few weeks. Never in our mind did it cross that we'd be here 2.5 years later. We went back and forth at our university, explaining our circumstances, which was already difficult enough. The uni made it very clear that they thought the best course of action would be to drop out with no other recommended alternatives, which would encourage us to continue on with our degrees, something that we both wanted. And that unless we were able to receive a diagnosis for anxiety or depression, they would not be able to qualify us for reasonable adjustments. To this day, my sister's adjustments, as she's in her second year still, in the university system are still classified as anxiety and conceals the reality of our experience and reinforces the isolation of our grief and identity as carers. Although the experience of terminal illness will always be difficult due to loss of a loved one and the grief that follows, my autoethnography suggests that neoliberal social structures and the social interactions within this neoliberal society substantially adds to the negative effects of terminal illness. My family's experience suggests that illness and disability have been dehumanized because of neoliberal ideologies on deservingness and personal responsibility, which I believe negatively impact the medical essence of care and policies, thereby institutioning these detrimental attitudes. I suggest that the lack of external management forced my family to exhaust internal management. For myself, this manifested as internalized fear of stigma for being a carer and a griever at such a young age, an active avoidance of grief to sustain my life outside of illness, because I lacked the social framework and institutional accommodations to identify as a carer, a daughter, and a student. And if there is one thing I hope that you can take away from my autoethnography, it would be to encourage connection through bringing awareness to uncomfortable topics such as grief and dying and resisting individualist culture. Thank you.
So next we have Pascale Waschnig with a presentation entitled Yesterday.
Excellent. So my research at the moment is on the experience of families of missing people. In the UK, 170,000 people go missing every year. So it's a substantial number of people, and we don't realize that because nobody talks about it. And the aim is to train medical, nursing, and psychology students about their experience, so that they're able to better support them. So I'm going to read you a short text about one of the family members I met, and a snippet of his experience. We all are sitting today, and it might not be the right moment to hear about loss, and we've heard about your experience, which was really difficult. But if you feel like it's too much, then you can always take a break, really look after yourself first. And I'm here to talk after the reading. A dream. I awoke in our old house. The whole light is still turned on. I could hear music beating quietly through the walls, footsteps upstairs, and doors opening and closing too, forcefully. Teenagers, my teenagers. For a time I forgot. Then I overheard her chuckle. My son laughs so quickly and vividly, my chest hurts before I even moved. I dashed upstairs, barefoot, my pulse racing. The bedroom doors half open, posters on the wall, clothes shattered everywhere, and school bags abandoned on the floor, as usual. My youngster glanced up from his phone, annoyed. "Dad, can you knock?" he asked. My daughter rolled her eyes and smiled. "We're literally coming in a minute, 1 minute." I used to believe there would be millions of these. I stood there looking at them, for too long, because I knew something they didn't, something no parent should ever learn, that this ordinary Friday night would be the final time I saw him. Back then, I was always exhausted. I was concerned about homework, dirty dishes, how much time they spent online, and whether they appreciate anything we did for them. But not tonight. Tonight, every sock on the floor is sacred. Each complaint sounds wonderful. I followed them downstairs, only to hear their voice echo through the house again. My daughter seemed so loud, happy, and carefree. Not sad, not lonely, in silence in her room. My wife is in the kitchen cooking toast, happier, before sadness hunched her forward, before stillness entered our marriage, our home, and unloaded its baggage. She gave me an odd expression when I touched her face. What? She asked, laughing. There was nothing I wanted to say, only that I forgot her eyes used to shine before melancholy settled in. The four of us sat at the table. They argued about something meaningless, a concert perhaps, a friend, someone borrowing a hoodie without asking. I saw their mouths move. I memorized the sound of each interruption. That liveliness we never hear again. The way teenagers never complete sentences. The way they say whatever when they truly mean, I love you, but I don't know how to say it yet. I wanted to tell him not to leave the house tomorrow. I wanted to lock all the doors, hide his shoes, cancel the entire world. But in this stolen, borrowed time, I realized I couldn't stop what was coming. Instead, I paid attention. The kind we plan to give later, when we have more time. My daughter sat cross-legged on the sofa, painted her nails black. My son pretending to ignore the annoying music show while secretly singing along. I sat between them, close enough to feel the warmth on their shoulder, close enough to touch their skin. 13 years, 13 birthdays without a cake, 13 Christmas with one chair missing, 13 years spent scanning crowds of telephone calls, of police reports, of hoping that every unknown number will eventually be him. People stop asking after a while. The world continues moving without him, but our hearts still don't know how. My son said, "Night, Dad," before going to bed, just casually, as if there would be always another morning. When he went upstairs, I followed silently. I stood outside his door, listening to drawers closed, music humming quietly, and beds creaking. We were all together tonight. He was in the house tonight. Before sleeping, I opened each door one more time, not to see whether they were asleep, just to see them, to see him. I really can see him, the untidy hair, the long limbs, his face between childhood and adulthood, my baby. In the morning, I woke reluctantly. The house remained silent. There was no music, no slamming doors. There was no laughter through the walls, only pictures. But for one night only, I could remember. I was able to remember before he went missing, before he made headlines, before he became a question no one could answer, that he was just happy, that we were just happy, and that we never realized the miracle it was to be together. No, good time.
Good morning, everyone. Let's explore the idea that connection can be an ethical act. In situations of violence, displacement, and genocide, connection is an active choice. Remaining connected with friends whose lives are in danger requires courage, loyalty, and compassion. Resisting the temptation to look away becomes an act of resistance. Phoenix Rising in Gaza is an ongoing autoethnographic project. It's grounded in creative online conversations between myself and friends located in Gaza, Turkey, and England. These connections have been regular and ongoing for over 2 years, despite enormous challenges for our friends in Gaza. For those living through genocide, connection is a survival strategy. The conversations help protect memory, preserve identity, and resist dehumanization. At the same time, the conversations are spaces where knowledge is co-created, hope is nurtured, humor survives, and healing begins to emerge. Over the past 2 years, several themes have emerged. The first theme is that connection is a sign of life, a message received, a voice heard, a face on a screen. These are affirmations that someone still exists. When people are being erased from headlines, statistics, and public consciousness, maintaining connection is a way of saying, I see you, I remember you, you are important. Connection becomes an ethical act because it affirms the humanity of another. The concept of home is another theme. Home is much more than a physical space. We need homes for our bodies, homes for our relationships, homes for our minds, and homes for our spirits. Our friends in Gaza have lost their physical homes. However, they protect their homes of the heart through family relationships. When the universities were destroyed, they created virtual spaces for learning. When mosques were destroyed, they deepened their faith. While buildings can be destroyed, the deeper dimensions of home can remain remarkably resilient. Our conversations have been designed to build intercultural bridges to form international links based on shared values. Meaningful connection does not always require physical proximity. Our connections are based on showing up. Our presence, our willingness to listen with sincere interest creates possibilities and opportunities. Memory as a form of resistance is another theme. Our online conversations are recorded and public. They create a living archive of experiences, reflections, and hopes. For our friends in Gaza, memory is a refusal to be erased. Remembering is a way of protecting existence. We may think of healing as something that happens after trauma. The metaphor of the phoenix rising reminds us that regeneration happens during the trauma, not only after it. Creativity can arise during uncertainty. Creativity is not simply the outcome of healing. Creativity itself heals. Several friends in Gaza have created networks and initiatives to preserve culture, support community, and generate opportunities. For example, the use of storytelling to sustain cultural identity and to create value. Creating something from nothing to contribute and add value to the lives of others is an inspiring use of one of our most renewable resources, creativity. Hope has remained a core theme in our conversations. Hope has been maintained through our relationships, through our shared stories, through humor, through dreams of a better future for the children. As a researcher, I'm not researching about people in Gaza. I'm researching with my friends in Gaza. My own story is interwoven with the story of my friends. My family history of migration from the Punjab to England is similar to the stories of my friends who have been forced to leave Gaza. During partition of the Punjab in the 1940s, thousands lost their lives and around 2 million were made refugees in their own country. My own history has shaped the questions arising from the Phoenix Rising in Gaza project. Difficult questions such as, do we stay and fight for the right to remain in the land of our birth? Or do we leave and seek refuge elsewhere, knowing that we may spend decades struggling to belong and to be treated fairly? Each of us faced with that dilemma has to make a choice according to the needs of our body, our mind, our heart, and our spirit. Perhaps each of us possesses an inner compass, an innate wisdom that helps us find direction and tells us when it is right to stay, when it is time to move, and when we need to recreate and rebuild. The Phoenix Rising in Gaza project is a reminder that creativity is a generative life force. It remains present in survival. It remains present in suffering. It remains present in hope. Through our connections, we discover that we always retain the capacity to create, to contribute, and to care. No matter our circumstances, we can always contribute. We can always create something from nothing because we care. Thank you.
Which is good. So, yeah, time to open up the floor for discussion or questions or responses. Everybody just needs to breathe. Breathing. Yeah. Yeah, if you can just introduce yourself as well.
Sure. So my name is Abiodun Abdul. I do research at the University of Nottingham. My question is for Jamie, for yourself. I'm curious with your this new concept of autoaltergraphy. Was there one particular experience that stood out for you, which helped you come up with this theory, with this concept, or was it perhaps a combination of different experiences that led to this?
Yeah. So yeah, it's really a combination of kind of refining, I guess, trying to be as precise as possible, like as to epistemologically, methodologically what I do, and increasingly realizing that it's not really best described by autoethnography, but is better described by autoaltergraphy. And it's really about the mysterious encounter that one has with the world and with others. So almost all of my work fits into that. As one example, in 2017, I did an ethnography where I spent 24 hours with a tree. And the question really was, how is the tree experiencing the world? And so it's an auto, it's an alter, it's an autoaltergraphy. The trace of that was that I kept field notes and then I published those field notes online in a Prezi. So it was a trace of an autoalter encounter. And I've done other work, which is also kind of multi-species sort of stuff, which kind of fits the same. But then I'm also interested in, extraordinary experiences, so mystic experiences. I'm interested in mystic experiences across different religious traditions and how those kind of either resonate or don't resonate with each other, the similarities and differences between those. So again, the best conceptualization thing that's most precise to sort of describe that work has kind of kept coming back to this notion of autoaltergraphy. So yeah. Annalise, yeah. Annalise.
Hello. What a wonderful, powerful session that was. I really appreciate all of the presentations. Jesvir, what an important piece of work you're doing. Pascale, what a beautiful, poignant piece that was. As for Hanna, I'd just like to say that sadly I lost my own mother to terminal illness, and I wonder whether or not the disconnect in grief is the way that we cope with the dehumanisation of the professionals, who I understand have to step back so that they themselves don't have to deal with grief during their treatment of people, but sometimes that can be very, very harsh on the rest of us left behind. But my question was for Jamie. Before you started your piece, you apologised for there being a lack of stories, and I just wondered, what about your piece, what about your autoaltergraphy do you think stopped the stories from coming?
I'm going to answer this very quickly because I also want there to be questions for other presenters as well. I don't want to take over. So it was simply, Annalisa, thank you for the question though. So it's simply a matter of time. So fitting within the 8 minutes didn't allow me to include the more narrative, storytelling, experiential side. And in a sense, I wanted to kind of condense it so that I could bring out those more theoretical, sort of analytical sort of threads. But yeah, I would definitely want to expand this to include more kind of evocative, experiential sort of, stories. Thank you. Yeah. We have other questions. Yes.
Thanks. This is a question for Hanna. Hanna, in order to make your very difficult experience in autoethnography, I imagined you had to also perhaps interview people who had gone through a similar experience, or certainly gather information of other people who've gone through, loss and grief due to terminal illness in the family. And I'm curious if having to navigate other people's experience of it might have caused secondhand trauma from living or from taking in other people's firsthand trauma. And if so, how did you navigate that? How do you deal with that as a researcher?
Hanna?
Sadly, because I did this autoethnography for my dissertation for my undergraduate, ethically, the ethics board at my uni was very against me speaking to anybody or even including my own family. So I didn't unfortunately get to speak to other people, but I did read a lot about other people's experiences through autoethnography. Parts of it were very hard. It was already hard recollecting things of my own experience, but overall, I would say it did the opposite. It was hard, but I think choosing to do my autoethnography about terminal illness allowed me to, yeah, like I was like connect to other people. And I think my family have felt really alone and isolated, and it's not something I've been able to connect or talk about with friends or other people around me. So it was really nice reading about other people's experiences and theory on grief and stuff like that. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Yes, Bethan.
As ever, don't really have questions. After presentations like that, the experiences sit deep inside, so I quite find it difficult to have words. But first of all, I'd like to apologise, Jamie, I missed yours. It was high on my agenda, but I got caught in an amazing conversation outside the door, which benefited me. But Hanna, I wanted to say, I came in, you'd started speaking, and I was all over the place, and I sat here, and by the end of your presentation, I don't know if you were aware, but your voice was so different. You found courage as you spoke, your body changed, you found your voice, and you were galvanized by your own story. And that I couldn't really hear what you were saying, not because of what you were saying, but because of where I was. But suddenly the tone of your voice changed, and it made me sit up, and I got my notebook out and I started writing, and it was your quality of your presence changed. So I think I just want to encourage you to carry on in what you're doing, because I think it will give you strength. And I think it kind of ties in with what you just said. By hearing your own story, I think this is the power of autoethnography. We see ourselves because we've abandoned ourselves very often in the trauma, and we get to see ourselves, and that makes us integrated, who we are, and then we can connect to other people. And the vicariousness of the trauma then is less painful. And I think this has been my experience. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Bethan. Yeah, that was a really important reflection. Thank you. Anybody else got any questions? Elise looks like he's about to say something. We definitely want Elise to say something.
Thank you. Kind of moving toward language, what an extraordinary set of papers that really reaffirm how autoethnography takes us into places of the unspeakable. You know, the use of language that takes us to places we can't journey to. How do we really articulate the kind of chronic sorrow, the ordinary and the extraordinary running together? I have so many resonances here. What an extraordinary way to start that. But in particular, too, and I'm sorry I didn't write down your name, on Gaza, the presentation on Gaza, how important to remind us, you know, when you say that Phoenix rising doesn't happen after the fact, it happens during, and how important for communities that are consistently displaced, consistently bombed, that there really isn't an after in the way that we can think of that, in that sense of ongoingness. And you really brought that very, very closely to my mind in that ongoingness. And Jamie, a former colleague of mine, coined the term stand-up theory for this 1 foot in the poetic and 1 foot in really deep kind of phenomenological understandings of self-other relationships. And you navigate that, I think, really, really beautifully, using language to get us inside some really dense places with these traces of stories there. Hanna, just as I think it was Bethan said, your coming into confidence and how your voice shifted, that the storing of your experience, and how as community we received it and felt that sense of connection, that we could witness your transformation all the way through. And Pascale, I got to hear a little bit of your stories a few days ago in workshop. What a pleasure it was to come and hear the extended story, and to have you frame it with an exit strategy if at some time you need to take care of yourself. And I could see you doing that and appreciated that. Really dense way to start the day. I need about 3 more cups of coffee. Balance out where I am. Thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you, Elise. Thank you for that. Yeah, fantastic. So Sally, yeah.
Just to comment, I've written it down because that refusal to be erased really hit me of that is autoethnography, that are stories. And thinking about what Bethan was saying, that when you were saying, Hanna, that you saw yourself in the stories of others. I remember being at an online conference and Reagan Fox saying exactly the same. It was actually, there was healing that came from reading other people's stories. So yeah. Thank you. I'm really moved this morning. Too moved.
Pascale, I have a question for you, which is really about, in doing the work that you do, how do you navigate taking care of yourself? Like, do you have certain things that, you do basically?
Well, it's not easy, and I guess Anna and anyone who's working on a very personal subject always finds it very difficult to ground oneself but I understand for Anna that for me it's been very useful to do autoethnography because it allowed me, as you were saying, to confront a trauma that I was not, I didn't want to see, or I didn't want to dwell into. And it allowed me to make it, to really see the resources I had within myself to make sense of that story, and to construct, had to integrate that trauma into your life story. It's part of, trauma is part of life, unfortunately, and it's very difficult to deal with it. I found it more difficult to be confronted to other family stories, I must say, myself, because it really reflected what we didn't know. At the time when my mom went missing, she had Alzheimer and she was never found. And that was 13 years ago. So at the time, we didn't know what to do. And when I heard all the families' stories, I could see what they did and what we didn't know we could have done. And that was very difficult, actually, to realize that actually we could have maybe tried that or this, and it might have made a difference. And that was particularly difficult to hear. But I'm struggling. I must say, I'm still struggling. And life happens, and sometimes other traumas happened at the same time. So they just add up. I found that art for me was very much a release of emotions and allowed me to put on paper what I couldn't really deal in thoughts. And that made a huge difference. It allowed me to really understand the processes or understand what really mattered, the core of the experience or the core elements where I maybe needed to work on. Yeah, and using text or was also useful. So I like your collage because that's part of your journey as well, part of what helped you or helped your family, you said, or your mom to go through that trauma. And I think we all have things that we need to try. And sometimes it's art, sometimes it's a walk outside, as you did this morning, or just doing some sport to release the stress, or doing activities we used to find comforting when we were maybe teenagers, or go back to our roots, or go back to if I listen to other people's tips and try.
So thank you, everyone. Yeah, that's been an intense session. Yeah, I mean, what more can I say? Thank you for all of the contributors. Yeah, thank you.